with a 9.5-foot wingspan. The California Condor is the largest North American flying land bird. These birds are a soaring bird. Because they're a soaring bird, they have those primary feathers that look like fingers. They need updrafts on which these birds ride and find their food. They have a featherless head. It's because they're a scavenger. They're strictly scavengers. They feed on generally large carcasses. And for millions of years, they've served as nature's defense against disease. "22 individuals is how close the condor came to extinction." Think about that, 22 individuals standing between the species and extinction. Luckily, there was a group of biologists and concerned individuals that thought that wasn't good enough. They wanted to know why. The captive breeding program was initiated to basically save the species from extinction. But really, the ultimate goal was to produce enough birds so that they could be reintroduced back to the wild. They were able to release these birds back into their original historic range in 1992. And in 1996, we began releasing birds in Arizona. Back in the early 80s, there were indications that lead was one of the contributing factors to their decline. But really, it wasn't revealed in our release program in Arizona until 2002. And ever since then, every year, coinciding with the deer hunt, you see high levels of lead observed in the condors. And as a hunter, I understand that the potential for lead to be in the field comes from the bullets that I use. They don't retain 100% of their mass. So we did a fragmentation study. Through our study, we identified by shooting 34 deer, x-raying them whole, and then cleaning them as they would be cleaned in the field, and then x-raying the gut pile. The gut pile contained as many as 400 or 500 fragments. Every one of the whole deer had fragments. The only 2 gut piles that didn't have fragments came from deer that were shot in the head and neck. So it made sense. Where do you target an animal to put it down humanely? If you're really good, you shoot it in the head. I don't know many snipers. What the rest of us do is try to shoot through the lungs and the vital organs. That's your target area. What do you leave in the field? All of those organs. So it's pretty straightforward. What are the birds eating? Deer. When are they eating the most deer? When they're being killed and the remains of deer are left in the field. The question is, what do we do? We've observed blood lead levels in condors at extreme levels. Such extreme levels that if you or I were to have the same, we'd be admitted to the hospital immediately. So we're placing carcasses out at the release site to provide a draw to the condor population, because that's our single greatest management tool, is being able to trap these birds. We get the carcasses from dairies down in Phoenix. They're stillborn dairy calves that are donated to the program. And we put them out under the cover of darkness so that there's no positive correlation between humans and food. But we take the carcasses, we cut them open to allow the birds quick access and to make it really enticing. And we put them into this huge walk-in trap. Why don't they just fly right into the trap and feed, it's because feeding is just a part of their daily life. The social structure of condors is revealed in watching them on the trap before they go in. You understand that there's a community there, their interactions, and you begin to understand the level of intelligence of condors. Some of those condors are pretty wary. They don't want to go in the trap. They've been in there before.
They're constantly expressing themselves, constantly, whether they're trying to be obvious about it or they're trying to hide it. There's like all these different layers of what's going on. You know, their eyes might be saying one thing and their body language says something else, and then the feathers standing up or laying down or bringing the ruff up. It's endless.
The head color of a juvenile is very distinguishable. It's dark. Even the pigment and the feathers of the head are dark. That transitions at about 5 to 6 years of age as they approach breeding age into beautiful pink, vibrant pink and orange, all these different colors. And that signifies the beginning of their breeding years. And condors can live up to 50 to 70 years.
The meaning of life to a condor, consciously, is it wants to be at the top of the hierarchy. And that's what motivates just about everything they do other than food. Every pair has their place. And status is everything to them. Their breath, believe it or not, isn't gross like they've been eating some rotten animal. It actually is a very fresh smell. The way I describe it is, it's like if you took a fresh carrot and broke it and smelled it. It smells fresh, kind of like that. If they get upset, it doesn't smell so great when they like throw up all over you. That's probably one of the worst smells you can ever smell in your life, is condor regurgitation.
We're gonna get 114 first, and he's probably gonna be the biggest bear. So. Really nice to get him in the box first. But... grab them by the tail and the wings so they can't move. That's what you don't want to happen. But put him between your thighs so he can't get his wings loose. Try not to get a wing through a hole in the neck. And just let him do the hop into your arm. Bunch of ways to hold the head. I like to grab it behind the jaws. Yeah. You don't want to grab the throat like that. Ruin their trachea. Or some people do this hold. Yeah, that's how I do it at hopper. That's whatever you're comfortable with. Yeah. So I'm gonna set him in your lap, belly down. Yep. So I gotta look at the tail and get the tail up. And then Matt will get the head. So all you gotta do is put your arm around his body so that right wing doesn't get out. And the legs should be fine. But maybe even keep a little pressure down here with your elbow just so you can't get those legs up in your lap. Bada bing.
The primary reason for trapping birds today is to test their blood lead levels. If they should have a high lead level, we're able to take them down to our treatment facility where we can remove that lead from their system. We're not talking about a few random exposures. We're talking about 80% of the population showing signs that they've been exposed.
You know the saying, chelate at 8 in the morning, give them a dose of calcium versinate, EDTA. Basically what the calcium versinate does, or the EDTA, is it binds to lead in the bloodstream, and it allows the bird to excrete it at a very high rate, much higher than it otherwise would be able to do. And then we'll give them like basically 5 days of treatment, twice a day, and then retest. Reweigh, check the crop, sometimes even x-ray to see if they've passed those bullet fragments or not.
If we're lucky enough to trap the birds in time, we can treat them if necessary and get them back out for breeding season.
You find a condor nest, that is the most rewarding aspect, finding a condor nest. That's the holy grail for me. So I'm like, I got excited. I'm like, okay, next day, I knew I was tracking the next day. I'm gonna go look for this bird. I go to Page, and Derek goes out to the GPS coordinates, and he had 193 out there, and 193 stood up, and Derek got a picture of this blue egg right under 193. I'm like, yes, it is a nest. So they finally have an egg, and it's not broken. She probably just laid it, so that was cool. And then, but I'm like, okay, well, they got an egg. There's no way it's gonna hatch. I mean, it's a trio. And we documented them fighting inside the cave, 241 fighting 193, 241 fighting 243, you know, and like this egg's gonna get cracked. And then we even had a couple times where they were outside the cave for like an hour and a half, and it was like freezing. And we're like, it ain't gonna hatch, it ain't gonna hatch. But it's cool, they got an egg. And then Julia one day confirmed that it was a chick. I couldn't believe it. I mean, we were all talking to each other, we were all text messaging. I was text messaging Eddie, and Eddie was text messaging Julia, and we were all like, wow. And I wanted to celebrate. I said, oh, I'm gonna take you all to dinner at Cliff Dwellers, let's just go. And we celebrated. I was as happy as anybody that they pulled it off. I mean, they still haven't pulled it. The chick may not survive to fledging, but this proves that they can produce a viable chick. That's huge. And we'll take every single wild hatch chick we can get.
That red wall out there where you see it goes in and comes back out, that's where the nest cave is for 441. Let's get ready to go way down. Just be really careful, because this is really, really steep and lots of ledges, like 3-foot ledges you gotta climb down, and it's really sketchy, so.
Awesome.
Just watch your footing. Basically drop off the face of the ears right here.
Although some nests are relatively accessible for monitoring, many of the attempts are deep within the recesses of places like the Grand Canyon, requiring multi-day trips just to get the opportunity to observe breeding behavior.
Just concentrating on not falling. Goal number one.
This is a big worry, whether this bird was alive or not. It's been a couple months at least. So. Because I have not seen that bird move yet. Matt, can you tell that it's a black-headed bird?
I mean, I don't see a head. I don't see the head.
I think the head is facing us.
You think so?
Mm-hmm. That's what it kind of looks like to me. All signs point to baby condor in cave, not fledged yet. So it's really interesting. Yeah, it'd be the icing on the cake would be if the bird fledges in the next 2 days while we're down here. Hasn't actually moved yet. It's just sitting there, but likely. I mean, I'm sure it's fine. This will bring great joy to everybody at the house. Rawr.
So the chicks, like, have you seen it at all?
Mm-mm.
Why is Tim upset?
Because when we got here, we thought I saw a condor. But the thing is that light plays tricks with your eyes. So now that today we've seen the shadows go by, there's a condor-sized rock in the cave that we mistook for a condor chick yesterday. So at this point, we've seen both the adults fly by, and no condor chick has responded by wing begging at the door, which I don't think is very you know, normal. So, it's not a good moment, because there's a possibility that the nest didn't make it. I say possibility because there's still a chance that that chick is just really lazy and sitting in the corner. We'll see.
I was at the overlook and it was open still to the public, and there were people going around the railings out on little points, and in my mind I just wanted to tell them that if you fall, that birds are feeding on somebody right now that had fallen. There was maybe 5 to 10 birds on it.
You know, you got deer on the Kaibab Plateau, you've got cattle in House Rock Valley, you've got bighorn sheep in Marble Canyon, you got pronghorn, and you've got a lot of dead people in the Grand Canyon. My first reaction is, what was in the person's pockets? You know, what are the birds eating? Was this guy a suicidal pill popper? And are the birds, because they will go into pockets first, because they are like orifices in the carcass. You know, now with change and coins known to kill condors, did he have money in his pockets? You got to think of the condor. That's not, you know, that's just a carcass to them.
The more freaky thing that happened was a couple months later, I was down tracking at the South Rim. It was the summer season and a lot of people were around, and I just had an old couple come by asking about condors, and I told them, if you keep walking down the trail, there's one in plain view. And they asked me, did you know the person that found the body? And I remember his name at the time, and I asked them and said his name, and they're like, yeah, that was our son. And they were both in tears at some points, and they wanted closure, and I think they were told by the Park Service that it was a suicide, and they just wanted somebody else's opinion, and I just told them that it didn't look like a good spot if you just went out to commit suicide, but it could have been. There's no way I could tell, and that was more strange and freaky than finding the body, was meeting and talking to his parents.
In the wild, a condor pair will only produce one young every other year. In captivity, they can produce 2 per year per pair.
Condors, anyway, are really easy to breed in captivity. They move in, there you go, food, water, nest box, let's do it. The top male doesn't really choose who he wants. He is the top male, and the females compete for his attention. And whoever can, you know, fight or find a way to become next to him all the time is the one he chooses. He'll breed with anybody. When the breeding season starts, the birds get together and they start to copulate and investigate their nesting area and start grooming it. And the nesting season or the breeding season really starts to get advanced. We start waiting for the female to show signs that she's going to lay an egg.
If the first egg is taken and put into an incubator to be taken care of there, about 26 to 30 days later, the female will lay another egg, thus producing 2 chicks in a single year. That's what has allowed us in such a short period of time to grow the population to now over 400 birds.
When the eggs are pulled from the nest box, they come here first to be processed. We'll weigh them, we'll put them up to this bright light, this candler, to get a look at them and see what the status of the egg is. It's probably the most fragile stage of a condor's life. One of the longest incubation periods of any bird is a California condor. It's 57 days. This is a replica of a condor chick, and I built this with paper and masking tape and staples. The natural hatching position, or the normal hatching position for a condor, or any bird really, is head under right wing and exposing the egg tooth to the surface of the shell. When the chick starts to feel deprivation of oxygen, it has a muscle in its neck called the hatching muscle that will start to spasm. And as it spasms, it starts popping holes in the side of this egg and allows air in.
Hi, honey. Whew. Oh, he's here? Oh, there you go.
Every time it pips and pushes, and eventually it gets all the way around and pushes, and the top falls off, and it can exit the egg. That's the beginning of life for a condor. And now it gets out and has to reshape its head and get oriented and that type of thing. So it's stuck in that thing for all the time. They're helpless. They can barely walk. They can barely hold their heads up when they first are hatched. And they may be brooded for several days before they can actually feed. They stay in one place and they're fed as they grow, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger until they fledge. Condor is one of the longest fledging periods of any bird, about 5.5 or 6 months before they can really actively fly. Chicks are very vocal. They make a lot of noises. They make a lot of one-syllable noises too, but it's more of a something like that. In the beginning of the program, there were no parent-reared birds. Everything was hand-reared because they were so priceless and so irreplaceable that we just wanted to get them alive. You know, you start with 22 birds. You're not going to throw caution to the wind and say, hey, you big vulture, get a load of this, raise it. No, everything is like controlled. You got to get in there, and you got to look, and you got to be able to, you know, daintily reach for something and pick it up and look at it, and do all this stuff, or preen yourself, and do all kinds of stuff that the chick can relate to and can see the other birds doing. We have to rear them, and we have to mentor them. Doing parent rearing is easy. You just give the chicks to the parents, they raise them, they mentor them. What about all the extras? They have to be reared too, and they all have to be treated as something that is going to go into the wild, and it may live 70 years, and if it's a failure, and it's a behavioral failure, it goes into a zoo and lives 70 years, and somebody else to deal with it. So we take a lot of care into rearing these birds to make sure they're the best candidates for whatever they're going to go into, captive or in the wild. Eventually, hopefully they all go to the wild.
So in the wild, the parents care for the chick. Birds that are produced in captivity don't have that luxury. So that's where we come in. The field crews monitor and take care of those young in their first months in the wild.
We make a judgment call on which birds are the best suited for release based on behavior in the flight pen. They see the door opening, but it usually takes them a while to decide that they're ready to make the run for it. You know, that first flight's usually pretty ugly. Usually getting kind of blown around by the wind, their wings look a little floppy, they're getting chased by ravens. Other condors are chasing them around. As soon as a condor leaves the release pen, the person who's up top, up at the release site, will radio down to the biologist below that, you know, a bird has left. I mean, we're working in these areas where there's huge cliffs, big talus bands, hills, rocks, boulders, trees. And so if you lose eye contact with that bird, you might know the general area where it is from telemetry, but you're not sure exactly where it is. And then relocating it late in the day is going to take, you know, that much longer and be that much more difficult.
I'm watching Condor 384, which is a recent release that we released 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago, I think.
So why are you watching this newly released bird so intently?
Well, to make sure that it doesn't land in a spot where predators, ground predators, can get to it, like coyotes, bobcats, and mountain lions. So hopefully we're going to keep watching this new release until sundown. Hopefully it won't leave. Otherwise we'll have to hike up and scare it up to a safe position.
You know, chase the bird, approach it, yelling, clapping, screaming, waving hands, being as intimidating as possible so that that bird realizes that being on the ground is not a safe place to be. And hopefully it'll take a flight and relocate in a safer place where it's up on a, you know, on a cliff face or on a rocky ledge.
When you spend, you know, 10 hours a day, 12, 15 hours a day, you're watching one bird in particular, you develop a relationship. It's not a, you know, a communication relationship, but you're watching that bird, peering in on its life and trying to glean something from that information. So it means something.
I wasn't going to cry that day, but I tell you what, I was upset. I was just angry, you know, and I rarely get angry on the job. But that was just, you couldn't help it, just a visceral reaction. You know, I was angry. I was here at the bridge that day, and the only bird I believe I had that day, if memory serves, was 367, downriver. And I had a booming signal right here. Bird's right here, stationary, or it's a transmitter. I mean, maybe the transmitter fell off, which crossed my mind, wouldn't that be nice? See where the crack ends right there? There's just a drop off. That's where she was. I hiked down the crack and I got within like 20 feet of her. I could have got closer. I could have walked right up to her, but I wanted to see what was going on. So I started, I clapped, I yelled. No response. Her head was tucked in her dorsal feathers. That's a bad sign. I mean, you got a bird that is completely incoherent. It wasn't even that windy, so she could hear me. I mean, I'm, you know, I'm some guy scrambling down the rocks, making noise, clapping, yelling at her. No response. So my first thought was, okay, I'm not going to try to grab this bird by myself. I mean, you know, I need some help. So I hiked back to the rim. Immediately gave Eddie a call, told him what I'd seen, and he comes with a sky kennel and a dip net. And Eddie said, okay, I'll go down there and net the bird. You just stay behind me. I said, okay. Eddie heads down first with the dip net, who leave the kennel up there, and I follow about, you know, 5-10 feet behind him. And he sees the bird, and he says to me, this is what a condor dying of lead looks like. You know, and he said it real, like, he was real sad about it, you know. And we know, we've been doing this long enough, and you got a bird that's acting like that, you know, and not even trying to get away from you, you know, because that drop off right there is about at least 100 feet, if not more. You know, if it were healthy, it could easily get away, but it didn't want to leave. So Eddie very slowly walked up to it with the dip net, and he got within maybe 5-6 feet of it and just put it over the bird. And then the bird started struggling, but it didn't struggle much because it just didn't have the energy. So Eddie gets the bird out of the net. I hike down to his position, and I hike out with the net, and Eddie hikes out with the bird. As soon as you see a bird like that, you don't even need to test it. You know it's sick of lead poisoning. And it had a really pale yellow head. I mean, usually much more vibrant colors, as you know. The head was very pale. I'm like, this is a bad sign. I lay it down on the freezer, because Eddie's gonna immediately give it subcutaneous fluids. While I'm holding the bird down, Eddie puts the needle in, but the bird starts convulsing. I mean, just convulsing. Its eyes were closing and opening, closing and opening. And I don't know if it was reacting to the needle. I don't know what was going on, you know, but it was convulsing. Eddie tries to put the needle in like 2, maybe 3 times. And then Eddie says, all right, forget it. Just put it in the aviary. I don't, you know, this bird's just, you know, reacting. And I lay the bird down. And as I'm laying the bird down, its head just, I mean, it literally just dies right there. And Eddie gets over the bird. He puts his hand on her dorsal side, and she just dies. It was horrible. And he said, she's gone, you know? And I was just so upset because this bird was a potential breeder, and this was such a kick in the teeth. One less breeding pair we'll have, one less possible chick.
With many other environmental contaminant issues, there's been a relatively short time lag between when we found environmental problems and when we've decided to impose really stringent regulation on them. Lead is the exception to that. Lead is the exception, and I'm not exactly sure, you know, sociologically or economically why this is the case.
The NSSF opposes efforts to ban or restrict the use of traditional ammunition containing lead components for use in hunting or shooting unless there is sound science conclusively establishing that the use of traditional ammunition is causing an adverse impact on wildlife populations, the environment, or on human health of those consuming game harvested with traditional ammunition.
I missed.
We're conservation hunters.
Right.
Mad amounts of ammunition sales. Dingle Johnson, I mean, we're supporting conservation. A lot of conservation, shooting like that. I thought, well, you know, if I'm going to ask people to change the type of ammunition they use for the sake of condors on their deer hunting, that I'm going to switch to non-lead alternatives for my bird hunting. And pretty pleased with the results. It was more expensive, but I'm sold on it.
What do we got going on here, Parish?
Little duck, little sweet and sour barbecue duck with a grapefruit glaze.
Oh shit.
Oh shit.
Is that butter and grapefruit juice?
Yes. Never trust a skinny cook.
What's the crazy thing about that?
He was all like,
Still contently you remain. Still contently you remain. So walk me out into the night. Won't you walk me out into the night?
Only about 20% of hunters in Arizona had any idea that hunting with lead ammunition could be detrimental to condors or other scavengers.
Right.
So we knew it was an outreach issue right from the beginning. It was education and outreach.
Right.
And I think we knew that since non-lead ammunition was a fairly unknown entity to many hunters, and there were some bad rumors floating around about it, that we had to provide some incentive for the hunters to switch. So it was pretty quick early on in the program that we knew we needed to distribute the ammunition for free to the hunters. And we knew we should start with the big vendors, so that was Cabela's and Sportsman's Warehouse. And we were just able to set up a program with them where once we knew who the hunters were, and since it's a lottery draw for the hunts, we have the name and the address of every deer hunter on the Kaibab. We mailed them a coupon.
Well, I guess I didn't know that it was a mail-in program. I thought you had to drive to Cabela's and you could exchange the coupon at Cabela's for a box of ammunition. And quite frankly, it's a ways for me to drive from the East Valley to the West Valley. And so I'll tell you what I will do, though. When we get back, we'll send our coupon in and for 2 free boxes of ammunition.
You know, you also, you hear about the cause. I've been to the South Rim. I've seen the condors flying around, and obviously want to do my part too.
Yeah.
Since I didn't take part in the copper bullets, I will bring my gut pile out if we get one. How's that?
Awesome, man.
Okay.
So we hand out flyers. We put signage out all over the area, asking the hunters using lead to bag up the gut piles and bring them to the check station when they check in their deer. I collect them, and then I bring them to a landfill and have them buried, so no scavengers at the landfill can eat them either.
I used the Barnes triple shock 140 grain in the 7mm bullet. I reload my own bullets for my 280 Remington. I just figured I would just start loading all my guns in the non-leaded stuff, just so that I can be able to hunt anywhere in my country. And then fortunately, by loading the Barnes bullets, I've really been pleased with them. They shoot really accurate. They tend to be a little finicky on the bullet seating depth, but once you get that figured out and the right powder, they shoot really good. I can shoot really good groups.
And we got great feedback on both the free ammo program, and because it is a conservation program, and also on the ammunition. Over 90% of the hunters liked the performance of the ammunition.
The issue of traditional ammunition and efforts by some to restrict or ban its use is considered by industry to be the single largest threat we now face.
Everybody has a sense of entitlement in the U.S. It's what made us the United States. I'm proud of it. I'm one of those people. Yes, we have the right to hunt, to bear arms, to do all these things. With that comes responsibility. That's what we need to emphasize. That yes, you do get to go out and harvest a deer. And man, it would be great, wouldn't it, if you could not only harvest a deer, but provide a contaminant-free food source for a species that damn near went extinct. And you can participate in the recovery by changing the type of bullet you use. Yeah, it's a little more expensive. And that's been a major point of contention with some folks who say, it'll drive me out of hunting. If bullets cost $10 more a box, it's going to drive me out of hunting. I call them on that. Really? $10 more per box for 20 rounds? How many rounds do you use in your deer hunt? 20, 30 rounds for your deer hunt? Maybe you ought to start shooting a little bit, You need a couple bullets once you've sighted in your rifle. You might spend $2,000 on a rifle. You might spend another $1,000 on a scope, and we're talking about $10 difference. That's a hamburger these days.
You can criticize the NRA, but the reality is that we're here to protect a constitutional right. And I think it's being attacked from many, many directions right now. So I think we're all cautious. I think the American hunter, the outdoorsman, is extremely cautious about the political environment of today. It's scary. It's truly scary what is being attempted from a legislation and political special interest perspective. So just prove it.
What we do know is that the lead can get into the food supply. We don't have good statistical, scientific, rigorous evidence showing that the presence of lead in the food supply has had any demonstrable effect on human beings.
And there's not a single incident, reported case in Iowa, or anywhere in the United States for that matter, with a someone consuming game harvested with traditional ammunition having elevated lead levels, let alone having levels that were above the CDC threshold.
Why are we insisting that we show a child who has had brain development impacts because of a lead particle?
And that's one of the big problems in all scientific research that isn't at the bench, is that you're looking at statistical associations. Right. Because, like, you can't poison kids with ammunition and see that they die. Right. You know, that's not an ethical study.
In humans, at least in the US, we don't see many mortalities from lead poisoning in people anymore. You know, that was true in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, but mostly we see subclinical stuff.
You could have a child who is exposed to lead who has an IQ of 125 and be very superior and could be a filmmaker, they could be an attorney, they could be a physician, but they may have had the capacity to have an IQ of 145 and have been a genius, even smarter than they are already, if you see what I mean. Realistically, there's no level of lead that is safe. Lead is a foreign toxic substance. It's poisonous and neurotoxic in millionths of a gram levels.
From a veterinary point of view, one of the first cases we had, there's a small zoo up in Gray, Maine that has some non-releasable bald eagles. And we got a call that they came in one morning, one of the bald eagles was lying on the ground twitching. And it was dead by the time they got here. But we took an x-ray and there was this tiny little metal dense sliver in it. Now these are birds in a cage at a zoo. And most of the time they're fed, you know, lab rodents and things of that nature. But every once in a while, as a treat, you know, the curator would stop and, you know, cut a leg off a roadkill deer or pick up a squirrel or something like that. And he'd done it that week, you know, and we dragged the rest of the leg of the deer down here and x-rayed it. And yeah, there were little lead shards all through the muscle. Okay, well, what about the bald eagles and the condors and the loons that didn't die, but might have low-level effects? What should we be looking for? And certainly one of the things that I think we're documenting quite well in loons and in bald eagles is they're predisposed to traumatic events. You know, if they've got low levels of lead, they may not be dying from it, but they're getting hit by cars more. They're getting caught by predators more. Because they're impaired. But that's not unique to our region. You know, as you know from the West, there are people working on bald eagles and lead poisoning all across the United States. And of course, they're relatives. I mean, sea eagles in Japan and eagles in Scandinavia, and every place you have eagles, you have lead poisoning problems.
You know, we have had wildlife biologists look at the literature that's out there. Because, you know, for example, in the case of the bald eagle, we don't see a population impact. It's unendangered now, and it's recovering. It's not to the level that it was, but it didn't drop because of lead ammunition.
Suppose you owned an international corporation that mined metals, okay? Your job is to produce greater quarterly profits for your shareholders every year. And lead is always a big seller. It's been a big seller for 3,000 years or more. And it's cheap to mine and it's cheap to produce because it's got a low melting point. And I think one of the reasons that we fail with regulating lead is that the problem isn't the product. The problem is the raw material. I think honestly that we need really strong legislation. I mean, I think we need legislation, probably it's nationwide.
Slapping a ban in someone's face is not going to be the answer. And we see that in California. Ban went into effect last year, and they've already treated more lead birds than we have here in Arizona, and there's no ban. So
all that did was made a lot of people angry in the gun community in California, you know. So obviously, if you have a law but give people no incentive, okay, or reason to switch over, why are they going to change? You know, either enforcement or showing them the reason why lead is bad for the environment and possibly bad for them and their children.
I think the education needs to be needs to be a top priority. The talks, the discussion, the articles, things like this. I think it's still in the infant stages, even though we've been doing this lead thing for 4.5, 5 years now.
The way we're going to finally be able to get to a point where we can stop having to totally harass these birds twice a year, capture them, take a blood test from them. Luckily, these things are pretty hardy birds and they can handle this manhandling that we do. The only way we're going to get to the point at which we can stop doing that is if we know to a level of a lot more confidence than 90% that lead is not entering their food supply. And the way we're going to get that is with a nationwide ban.
You guys got your KIBAB stamps?
Yeah.
Okay, because we are
Changing hunters one hunter at a time, we don't have that kind of time. That's 50 years to get the NRA to change its mind. And that's a ground-up grassroots effort, and that's not going to happen.
I want hunters to take the active role that they are. It's happening. I want to see them get the credit for it. Because many people think of hunters today as just out for their own kill, you know. That's all they want is to harvest their animal, even if it's the last one. Well, that's not the case. I'm a biologist because I hunted, because I was raised in the outdoors. So I hunt because I'm a biologist. They're one and the same. Go sit out in the woods. Go get really cold. Go get really wet. Learn about the highs and lows and the ups and downs of your body and what you can take. And then I like to think about, well, what about the animals? They don't run to the trailer and start a fire. It gives you a tremendous respect for the critters that you chase. And I think makes you appreciate what it means to take one of those animals. And when you harvest a really fat, healthy, nice animal, you really have an appreciation for what that animal went through to survive at that level, and that's impressive. If you're a fan of liver like I am, now's a good time to pull that liver. I love the feeling that I get inside from harvesting an animal, processing it myself, putting it up in the freezer. I think it's innate in all of us. There's something good about providing, and that really does it for me.
It's really good.
It's yummy.
You've been drinking it?
We all have. It makes really good mixed drinks.
This is my birthday present.
Okay, we won't use it anymore. I'll get some different stuff.
You can use it. Agave nectar.
You just wanted to thrash us about it and then give us permission?
Well, just trying to...
That's a total sister move. I'm surprised
Jesus.
you didn't have siblings. That's a complete...
Chris, can
Yeah.
you drain the sink and get the meat out? Because I'd like to fix a salad while you're fixing
Yeah.
the meat.
We have elk steaks, fresh elk steaks from last year, all shot with non-lead ammunition.
It was rumored to be that lead was the problem for condors years ago. So, you know, I mean, that part wasn't completely new. But to see the number of fragments in the x-rays and how widespread those fragments were, that had never been done before. And when he completed that study and we saw those x-rays and then we saw it in the packaged meat, and then they repeat the study and you see it over and over again, you think, oh my gosh, this is not just about condors. Yeah. You know, it was an oh my God moment for the condors. It was huge. Yeah. But my first thought was, hey, if the condors are eating it, isn't that the same bullet you just shot the elk with, you know? And doesn't that mean that the girls are eating it?
What's more satisfying, shooting the animal or eating the meat after?
You know, I think eating the meat. The killing of the animal, nah, I'm not into that. Bagging it is a different sense for me. You know, taking its life is part of bagging it. Harvesting and then caring for and preparing and preserving that animal.
There's a tremendous amount of, I don't know, respect or admiration for the animal when you take its life and you're responsible for preparing the meat and then preparing the food. it's a whole different system than when you're, buying something out of the grocery store.
Yeah.
There's a whole different feeling to it, and having a freezer full of meat where okay, you're good for the next year on meat. It's the same kind of satisfaction I get from growing a big garden and canning a bunch of vegetables, or making a big batch of jam or something like that. It feels really good.
Story begins with the stork. Ages ago, speciation fork. 10,000 years ago, they had a range from California to New York. Then humans came across the ice, a land so rich it really enticed, and that began the condor's rise, the end of big game in the Pleistocene. And then came those Europeans. Pretty soon you would hardly see him, when one was sketched by Lewis and Clark. Oh man, the future was dark. Land change drilling, wanted shooting, poison disturbance, water polluting. The condor couldn't get ahead, and the coup de grace was fragment lead. Weighs 20 pounds, that's an estimate, with a memory better than an elephant. Use the Colorado as a shower, goes 100 miles in under 2 hours. Talking about the largest bird, flies above this part of the earth. Story has had less ups than downs, but things are finally turning around. 1987, that was the time of when they trapped them all up. The last was AC9. Biologists shared some angry words, but lucky for us, it's a loving bird. They were 22 and they multiplied. In 92, a few returned to the sky. Thanks to captive breeding in the double clutch, seemed that the condor finally turned its luck. But they have a chick only every 2 years, and they're not adults till they reach the % alcohol of our beers, and we lose that many every year because of the bullet which we shoot our deer. So when it comes time this November, this is the part you need to remember. Flight of the condor can't place a figure, so have copper loaded when you pull the trigger. Weighs 20 pounds, that's an estimate, with a memory better than an elephant. Use the Colorado as a shower, goes 100 miles in under 2 hours.